good morning and welcome. I think we need to get going. There's rather full agenda today. We've got quite a lot to get through, and I'm extremely excited at the prospect of what's going to be delivered today. I know that the 60 minutes that you're spending in attending this webinar is going to be well worth it, and I know that you're going to pick up some useful tools, techniques, and a couple of other ideas around on-the-job training. Joining me this morning, my two colleagues, in fact, three of them. Firstly, Lisa. Lisa is the champion of this product and has been driving this program in our organization and with our clients. And she's also responsible for IP accreditation, and she looks after our KZN region. Lisa will be sharing some of her insights together with Janine. Janine is responsible for, amongst other things, our training delivery and looking after the relationships that we build with our facilitators. And so between the two of them, I think you're going to walk away with a lot of insight today. I'm just here to transition between the slides and put my 2 cents worth where I can. But today we're going to be exploring what we believe is one of the most overlooked links between training and performance. It's how learning is transferred, applied, and reinforced in the workplace. I just want to be clear because it's not a new concept. It's something that's been around for a while, but it's something that most organizations are challenged with. And I'll share some of the responses that you openly shared with us when you were registering for this particular webinar. So this is not a session about delivering more training. That's I want to be very clear about. It's about improving how learning happens while work is being performed. So it's about improving how learning happens while work is being performed. Right, with that, I'm going to quickly jump over to the agenda. Please also, just as a disclaimer, my mic has been coming and going, so I've asked my team to just flag me. If it does disappear for a while, they'll jump in. And Stephanie, I've just seen you there. I forgot to introduce you. Stephanie will be looking after the chat and the polls. Oh, I can see already one penalty coming my way. Apologies. But today's agenda, you can see, is very full. I'm going to quickly cover some of the insights that were shared. We kind of grouped it to try and cluster the challenges that we found common areas on, why informal workplace learning often breaks down, the impact of inconsistent skill transfer on performance, the business cost of inconsistent workplace learning, how structured on-the-job training improves competence and consistency, and can on-the-job training work in any environment? I think a very important question. A lot of you are asking that. And why everyday on-the-job training was developed. Then the 8-step OJT model used to guide workplace learning, why everyday on-the-job training matters in modern workplaces, and the Everyday on-the-Job Toolkit designed for immediate application. And then, of course, next steps, what we're encouraging you to do once this webinar ends. Right, at the beginning, we asked a very important question when you were registering, and that was around the biggest challenge with training people in the workplace. And we asked this across varied industries, varied environments, different sizes of organizations. And quite surprisingly, I suppose it shouldn't be surprising, was that the responses were quite similar. And so what we've done is we've actually grouped these responses into 3 common challenges that we identified. The first one was balancing training with operational demands. And some of the responses are illustrated there on the right-hand side. So things like there is never time for people to leave their space to attend training, finding the time to train while in a busy operation, time constraints, and then the biggest challenge we experience when training employees in the workplace is balancing operational requirements with training attendance. So obviously time and training becomes a challenge when you're trying to also achieve the operational demands. And that's where we see on-the-job training as a potential solution to fill that gap. Second one, turning learning into workplace performance. The kind of comments we receive from you is training is not translating into change in behavior. applying theory to the practical world, ensuring that skills learned are properly understood and applied, and then follow through after attending training. And I think that's a big one. It's a common one. We hear it a lot. And then the final challenge that we identified was creating structure, accountability, and evidence. And that's around responses like this one. Departments do training, but do not keep records. No clear onboarding process, lack of structure, and then implementing an effective on-the-job training model, onboarding participants and their line managers or coaches to action the model and the recording and evaluation of such a model. So you can see that a lot of these challenges were similar. And again, this was across different working environments. And so what I'm pleased to share now is that these are the challenges. These are the exact challenges that we are looking to solve through everyday on-the-job training. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Janine. Janine, you're going to share with us a little bit more about the model and start taking us through it.
Super. So if you know anything about Kwelanga, you know that we love to find out what your challenges are so that we can find solutions for you. And so the EOJT is the solution to these challenges that you've shown us. And so what we've done is we have ensured that this model and this approach takes those challenges and first of all creates learning that's part of your flow of work, so that you're not having to take separate time aside to do that, but it's happening every day in the workplace as you go. But added to that, we wanted to ensure that there was continuous practice of skills, feedback is happening, and that there's actual competence that can be confirmed. So it's not just the idea of competence, we are actually confirming that the competence has happened and is happening on a daily basis. Added to that, yes, we do want to be able to measure all of this. So we've created practical templates that will enable you to do that. There's tracking, documentation, and a way to identify what the developmental needs are that we're looking at so that we can take all of those challenges, create the solution, and give it to you in a package that you can use in any environment, for any organization, for any skill on a daily basis. So let's just talk about some terms here, because terms can be very easily misunderstood. Now, the first term there, workplace training, when we think of workplace training, we can either think of this in the sense of formal training or informal training. So let's think of this in a practical example. Let's say I have an employee who is wanting to learn how to drive a forklift. So they're wanting to become a forklift operator. They would go for formal training on how to operate a forklift. But on-the-job training occurs when that forklift operator gets back into the workplace and is now doing this on a daily basis, knowing which stack of pallets to go to first and where the transport bay is that he needs to take it to and where to go next. How to operate all of those things within the workplace is on-the-job training. There is constant training happening even within that role after any formal training has occurred. This is happening day-to-day training. And then workplace learning is part of that where, for example, that same forklift driver might have 4 other forklift drivers on the same floor. And they're talking to each other, they're sharing with each other. One is saying, you know what, if you do it this way, it actually works better. Try do this, try do that. That's learning. So learning is occurring all the time. But we wanted to create a structured way in which that learning happens so that we can measure it and so that we get performance that is consistent. And we're not just having bits and pieces all over the place, or someone saying, tell me again how to do that for the 5th time. So I'm going to hand over to Lisa now to get into how we're actually going to make this happen.
Thanks, Janine. So I think everyone, by those challenges that were shared, can see that this is a critical problem, that the behavior is not changing, things are not, performance is not on the increase, and there's a lot of inconsistencies. So it's not that the learning that Janine spoke about is not happening. Learning is taking place, but the problem is that it's happening differently every time. So without the structure, it always comes down to who's doing the training. We've each got different ways of imparting information, different ways of sharing. So if I need, Janine spoke about forklifts, if it's a common practice in the workplace of doing a process on a computer, the way in which I share that information with someone versus the way Janine will share it will be based on what our experience is with that process. And the way in which we impart information varies too. So if you give it a structure, it helps people do it in the same consistent way all the time. So this will help them transfer the knowledge, more consistently, a balanced way. So unfortunately, there's the results. There's no consistent method. There's no standard way of teaching work. Learning quality depends on the person doing the training. And I think Janine, Mark, myself, being in the positions we are in, have seen how training, you think it's been done, the learning, the outcome's going to be reached. But then we go back, and Mark used a word yesterday, granular. We go and look at the granular and we see, well, actually it was in the way we translated that information. So we want to put that solution together that says this is how you can put the stopgap in place. So yes, over to Mark.
Thank you, Lisa. And I think that's one of the key success factors of any on-the-job training solution, is that you've got to have that structure, right? If you don't have that structure, then we have the inconsistency, and we see that when we have inconsistency, there's a breakdown in performance. And just remember that knowledge itself does not automatically become competence. I think people don't learn just because they've attended the training. People learn because they apply, practice, and reinforce what they've learned. One of those comments we had a look at earlier when I was going through the challenges was simply follow through after attending training. I mean, that's something we hear all the time. And I think that short statement captures one of the biggest challenges organizations face. And one of my favorite tools to illustrate this, in fact, it's a graph called the forgetting curve. I think most of you will be familiar with it. It comes out of an Ebbinghaus study. And that study revealed that 70% of new information that's acquired is lost within 24 hours. I'm going to repeat that because it's quite staggering. 70% of new information that's acquired is lost within 24 hours. So that, for me, is enough of a reason to say, hey, how are we making sure that we're reinstating or reinforcing the learning that is so important in the environment and the investment that we make? Because think about it, when we make an investment in training, we are looking to certain outcomes, right? If I'm going to invest money in my team in a particular skill set, my expectation is that they're going to come back into the office environment, and there's either going to be improved efficiencies, improved effectiveness or quality, better behaviors, improved relationships. There's some kind of expectation around what we expect when we invest either in training or systems or software, or whatever it might be. But there's that expectation that if I'm putting the money in, I'm going to get something out. And I think that leads me into the next slide. What is the business cost of the inconsistent workplace learning? And the example that we've given here is, you've obviously see the diagram there or the picture there on the right. Thank you, Steph. But for me, if we hold true that study that was done, then if we're spending 100,000 Rand on training, and within 24 hours, 70% of whatever was acquired on that training is lost, that's the equivalent of losing 70,000 Rand. I'm going to let that sink in for a minute. If you're spending 100,000 Rand on training and there's no reinforcement, 70,000 Rand of that money is lost. Now, I don't know in what world anybody would accept that as a good return. Because if you come on training or on expectations for software or whatever new system you're implementing, you want some kind of a positive return. Even if you take your personal money and you go to a broker, you want them to bring you more money back, not less. So if you take 100,000 Rand and turn it into 30,000 Rand in 24 hours, you're not going to be very popular in the workplace, I can assure you that. But that is what's happening if we don't reinforce learning. It's really as simple as that. And remember that I'm just talking about knowledge retention. There's also the component of application. So even if I retain 30%, how much am I actually applying in everyday work environment? And bear in mind that this is not intentional. It's definitely not intentional. Think about your own experience of doing training. For example, you'll go out of the office, do 1 day of training, come back to the workplace. That morning you get called into the office. There's a client emergency. You need to deal with it immediately because the person who's meant to deal with it is off sick that day. Can you please jump in, help out? And before you know it, you spend 2 or 3 hours backwards and forwards. You're now late for 2 or 3 meetings. And when you look again, it's the end of the day. And now you've got to catch up on those activities that you put on hold because you went out for training. And when you look again, a week has passed. And all those good intentions you had at the start of training are lost. Now, if you're losing 70% in 24 hours, the study shows you're likely to lose a further 10% in the next week. So you now only retained 20% of any new knowledge that you acquired. And again, through no fault of your own. And this is why on-the-job training in a structured, formal way is so important to plug those holes and make sure that whatever we're investing in, we're retaining so that we can have some positive return for the workplace. Right. Stephanie, I believe you've got a poll for us. Can I hand over to you?
Thanks so much for loading that, Steph. So while Steph's loading that, I'm just going to read this through for us. So we have a little question for you. Who currently provides the most training in your organization? Is it your supervisor, your experienced employee, your trainer, manager, peer support, so in other words, colleagues, or other? So click on the answer that in your experience is where most of the training occurs. I'll give you a few seconds to do that.
So at the moment, we've got trainers sitting at 26%, manager at 26%, experienced employee 21%, peer support at 10%, supervisor at 8%. But yeah, so far, trainer and manager is sitting at the top, both at about 26, 27%.
Okay, super. Okay, so what we're seeing here is the majority of training is happening from a specialized trainer or a manager. But in reality, that training can actually happen on any level. It can happen across roles, across organizational levels, and across departments as well. Think for a moment about someone who has just entered a role. They've gone through all the formal training. The trainer has trained them. Their manager has trained them. But they're sitting in a workspace and they're trying to find a document. And they can't find this document. They're going to lean over to their colleague and they're going to say to their coworker, hey, where do I find this document? Help me out here. That coworker at that moment becomes a trainer. That coworker is going to say, okay, you need to do this, go into here, try and find it over here. That's how you're going to do it. Now, if that coworker doesn't know how to do that in a structured way, there's no way of ensuring, as I said earlier, that this person's not going to go back tomorrow and go, tell me again where I find that thing. And now we've got frustration because the learning isn't happening. It should be, but it isn't. So again, that's where this approach and this model fits in, is that in everyday experiences, whether it is the manager, whether it's the supervisor, or whether it's the person sitting next to you, because sometimes we feel a little bit more comfortable asking that person than going back to the manager again or the trainer. Everybody is in this process of training each other. And so we want to ensure that that learning is actually happening. So it's not just relying on the trainer or on the manager. So Lisa, I'm going to hand back to you again because we have more exciting news coming from this.
Before we do, I'm going to quickly jump in. Thanks, Janine. Stephanie, you're not familiar with that little bit of on-the-job training that was mentioned there. I never come to you to find documents. But maybe please give us an update on where we landed with the final poll results before we hand over to Lisa.
Sure. So at the moment, we've closed the poll. So up on top, we find manager sitting at 30%, trainer at 28%, experienced employee at 20%, peer support at 9%, and then other and supervisors sitting at 7%.
Awesome. Thank you, Steph. Over to you, Lisa.
Okay, thanks, Mark. So here, we've said about having a structure. We've said about consistency, keeping it in a structured format that people can all apply the same process. Just something that was said in the previous slide with the poll and Janine giving some feedback, I had a word pop, and that word was assumptions. And often managers and supervisors, because I heard there the trainer within and the manager, they will assume that what has been delivered is happening in the workplace. Because sometimes, and what we pick up with clients as well, that those feedback conversations, how do I monitor? How do I check in? All of those things are also challenges. So when we train staff to train others, to onboard new staff, like an administrator, whoever, like the forklift driver, we assuming sometimes that the colleague is going to do a good job of it. And that's sometimes where the mistake happens, is because we can't assume just because you've tasked someone with to train them up on where to find those documents, how to access that, which bay is for what, which button is for that, and which button is for that in a technical process. So this just is about repeating the same. And like any template, like any structure, we always can adapt it to be fit for purpose. But if we don't have the framework, how do we move forward confidently? Okay, so this model will make sure that there is a defined sequence, that you have to demonstrate. I know Janine can attest to this because she does a lot of training in the supervisory and management fields, leadership fields. Delegation. People think they're doing it properly, but until they know what the model is to delegate properly, they realize, goodness me, I haven't been delegating at all. I've been telling or dropping and going. I've been telling. So yeah, there's a way of doing things. So we give this to you to empower. So, and then there's demonstration, the person's got to go practice, it's reinforced, but all the while you're tracking all of these steps. The feedback is built into the workflow. How does feedback happen? That's one of the biggest challenges that people have. Whenever we get asked to do supervisory and management training, that'll be a huge, that feedback is not effective. Some people just even shy away from feedback. So now we're saying, okay, you battle to give feedback, you're not too sure how to do it, we're going to give you the steps to follow. And if you plan and prepare with this tool, you're going to be better. But we know that that improvement comes from practice, right? So every time we use the tool, we'll get better at it. So here, Janine said it earlier, competence is confirmed. From the challenges we heard, there's no documented process. We don't know that they're competent. We think it's happening. It's not happening. There's no behavior change, or they're still not doing it correctly. Here, you have to actually sort of sign off to say that they have competently fulfilled this particular task. So definitely there, that key shift from informal exposure to intentional skills transfer. We've been intentional about it because we know the system that we're applying to it. So that performance gap that Mark was highlighting, the inconsistency leads to, you know, a performance deficit. Well, now you can be more secure in the fact that there should be reliable performance happening. So this is about the working in any environment. We've used different, just a couple actually, different scenarios, workplaces. But it was one question that a client asked. So, you know, we've got a highly technical environment, you know, can this work? So yes, it can. It was on a previous slide that across industries, across roles, workplace environments, because it focuses on how competence is developed, not on the technical content itself. It doesn't matter the task. The bigger the task, the bigger the process. Well, we all know when you do a project, or those terrible things that we procrastinate over because it just looks too large, they always say to you, well, how do you eat an elephant or whatever, you know, chunk it down, right? So the model will also tell you, go and chunk it down, because for this huge process, there are different tasks within the process. So this can be used, this whole model can be used for each different task in that process. So we put a list there. You will be getting the slide presentation afterwards. Stephanie makes sure that all attendees get this, so we don't have to read it all. So remember there what's in the banner. The content changes, the learning process doesn't. This is something that I feel, you know, we sit on the receiving end of lots of client requests for different things. And this was something that sparked my, well, yeah, interest and the passion, because, you know, we expect a lot from our people. We expect a lot from ourselves. If we're going to do something, we do it properly. And then we get frustrated because the outcome wasn't what we expected. But if we truly, like Mark was talking about, investment in training, we're wanting them to our people within our organizations to develop and grow. But if they really matter, there's other value that we can also attach to them. So for me here, it was what Janine said. Remember, we're doing a lot of peer-to-peer learning, training. You've always got an underling. Someone is battling. Even with me, I lean on people that are better. I've got people in our team that if I know I'm battling a system, well, I've got one chap and he knows he's probably in the webinar, who I go to and say, help me here because I'm just battling with this. Come and show me quickly. But what do? I make notes so that I don't have to rest on him too much. And I'm glad that the mics are off, because he might say to you, no, but you do sometimes come a bit too often. I don't know, hopefully not. But that is the type of learning that happens. It doesn't always have to be from manager down. Sometimes it's the manager that's seeking assistance on a particular skill. I'm not saying that junior has to give you all this feedback and declare you competent, because that's not how it always works in the world of work. But there's a lot of this peer-to-peer learning, and this system will just help. So this is not for a particular band of employee. Okay, so this was really about these colleagues, these peers, their supervisors, mentors, experience learners. They all take a role in training people up on the job. But we have to guide that learning, because we said earlier, you can't assume, and it's inconsistent because everyone's got their own methodology and way of imparting information. So this tool is a double-sided coin, because it helps the person doing the training, but it helps the person receiving the training. So that banner there for me is all important, is because enabling people to be better starts with helping them learn better. You know, that old common saying about common sense, eh? Logic to one is not logic to another. And that's what we've got. This stops all of that, because you will be required to go and think that critically, when I have to explain this task, there are particular steps. And I don't leave out steps because I'm assuming that knowledge, or because I do it 100 times a day. That's by the by. These are the important things, but that little step needs to come in. So it really just helps people slow it down and then think about it and then translate that information. So this is it's a cycle. Everything is a cycle, a process. So here we've got the actual model that we've based this tool on. And when we, training this, everyone will get this model and the steps will be unpacked in detail. So there is about identifying the training need. Obviously, someone's battling something, or there's been a pattern of behavior, or there's a skill set shortage. And so we identify that, but there's actually a tool that we give you. So critical things that you've got to think about when you plan. And then what about the outcomes? We know that we have to know what we want to achieve before we even start the planning. Okay, so we again come alongside and say, okay, well, what are you trying to achieve by training this person in this skill? Then, well, what is it that I've got to do, the task? And there's a tool again. And then it takes you right through to demonstrate, to guide the practice and observation because we're going to watch people. What do I have to think about when I watch people do a task or perform a particular process? What does this feedback look like? What do I need to think about when I give feedback? So we even give you some sample questions, examples, depending on industries, so that you can model your own. Confirming the competence, we spoke about that. There's a checklist and what you would have to look for and how you go and prove competence. And then obviously reflection, because for the person doing the training, that on-the-job training, and remember, we need to make that differentiator here. People that are in the webinar that are trainers, that are managers, or people that go into classrooms and train people in a virtual or face-to-face setting. This tool is not about improving your facilitation skills if you're a formal facilitator. Okay, if you're doing the more formal training or that training that takes place in the workplace, this is about giving you the tips to help people while they're performing, remember, while they're doing the job. Because some of the questions I could see in the pre-registration question or the registration question was about that possible facilitation, what happens in the classroom. Remember, we're not saying this is only for use in a classroom. Yes, it can accompany any training that you do in a classroom, but this is really about people are lacking a particular skill. They've got to do certain tasks. So how do we help them do it better?
Why does this actually matter? Now, we've discussed quite a lot about why it's important and the reality of what is actually happening in the workplace and how we want to find solutions to that. But it's more than that as well. So as an example, this particular model and approach is highly relevant, as we said, across the board. So whether it's onboarding processes or whether it's technical or systems training or whether it's cross-functional. You know, Mark was mentioning earlier when someone gets back into the workplace, someone else from another department is sick and they need to just step in and help that person. I need to have the skills to be able to help that colleague. So I need to have skills that are across different departments so that we're able to do that. So we can shift people around where needed. Those are cross-functional skills. Then also things like QCT in the workplace. And then also this really focuses on, as Mark mentioned, that 70% of where learning should be happening in a practical application way, not just in a classroom. That classroom setting is 10% of the learning. That's 70 and 20%. The 20% is learning from our peers. It's the learning while we're busy with the work. That 70% is practicing it. It's that I'm in this job. I want to know how these skills work. I move on and I say, oh, I'm stuck on this. Just explain to me how to do this part again. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about it happening in the process of doing your work every single day. It's not a separate thing. It's part of the process. But again, as we've mentioned, what's great about this is it's now structured. And because it's structured and there's a framework that you can follow, you now can ensure that there's consistency in the way things are shared. And everybody understands that. Everybody knows that. So everyone knows how to do it. They know what to expect in the process. There's real competence because we can actually see that learning has taken place. We can see change in behavior. We can see that what I've asked this person to do and train them on, they are actually delivering on and they're performing. They're becoming really great at it. They're taking on expert status in that thing that they've been trained in. It also creates confidence. So not only confidence for the person who is learning, because they will feel more confident because they understand this, they know how to do it, they feel confidence in themselves, but also in every other person who is trying to train someone else. So even that work colleague or that peer who's saying, okay, well, this is how you do it. They'll know how to share that information in a way that is actually going to produce results. Just like the supervisor will know, okay, they've asked me this question because they don't understand how to use this part on the system. I know how to share this. I'm confident about how to share this process and how to create learning for this person. And then there's contribution as well, because if everybody knows how to do this and we're all doing it in our daily functioning, we're all contributing to greater learning, which again creates performance at the end of the day. We get greater performance from our staff members. We get greater performance from our teams because everybody understands how to do this in the daily processes that we have. So part of why this is so exciting is because it's short. You don't have to spend a 2-day course learning how to do this. It's short. It's an easy, quick 2.5-hour webinar. It's practical. And again, as we keep saying, you can use this regardless of the content, regardless of what you're trying to teach someone. It can be used across the board because it's a multi-purpose, multi-transitional, everything type of tool that you can use in any situation. Also, you don't have those same disruptions in your operations. You don't have to take an hour out to now say, okay, we're going to do a training session tomorrow. This is how it's going to work. I need you for the entire day. And the person's going, okay, but what do I do about my workload? That doesn't get affected because, again, this is something that can happen as we go. There's also immediate workplace application. So instead of, as we were saying earlier, we learn something, we get back to the workplace, and it's only about 3 weeks later that we remember, oh yeah, I learned this skill. I forgot about that. I actually wanted to implement it. No, it happens immediately because we're doing it all the time. It's actually happening as we go. So another example of this would be, let's say we've got our salespeople going out to meet different clients. And let's say one of these salespeople has never actually encountered that very difficult client, and we're needing to hand over the very difficult client to this person. We can now, as we go through the process, this person can learn how to handle that client without having to go on a special course to do it, because it's happening as we go. It's also scalable across teams, different environments, and again, it's applicable to any industry and any workplace context. So it's about how to learn. This tool can make a difference everywhere. Thank you. Over to Lisa again.
Thanks, Janine. So Janine mentioned there it's short and it's practical. So what we've done here is created a 2.5-hour, 2.5-hour workshop. And the benefit here is that you walk away after that, obviously, hopefully feeling invigorated to take on more OJT, but you'll have practical tools to go and use the next time you have to train someone up. So again, we're saying because so many people do on-the-job training, they're not called trainers, but they are training people, and they're sometimes lost where to start. You think of your induction programs and all this sort of thing. Who's taking care of onboarding people? Who's taking care of teaching a new system when you change a system or a process? So you have your champions and you train them up with this tool. So the benefits there, practical and immediately applicable. And because of linking back to what Mark spoke about, that leaky bucket, you've got a structured system now. The performance you should see, and Janine spoke about the confidence from both sides. One person's getting better at the task, but the other person's getting better at conducting training. The confidence is growing in speaking and sharing and training. That's another area that we often get requests for. How can people collaborate better? You know, people come to us for conflict management training and we're saying to them, no, why do you want conflict management training? Let's talk about collaboration and workplace relationships, and let's get that sorted so that you don't land up with as much conflict. So this really, can you imagine if people are just feeling more confident and energized about that which they're doing, and they're talking to each other in a way that drives that confidence, and that I'm okay to give you feedback. This is not nitpicking. I'm not coming down on you. This is not a horrible session. It's actually about productivity. And it's not just about organizational gain. Absolutely. You've got return on investment. It matters. That 70,000 Rand that Mark spoke about losing, and 80,000 by whichever other day, you're only retaining the 20. We all get, yeah, we've got to do it properly because this matters to the organization. But remember why this was developed, because we want people to be better. They've got to feel okay. So here it's not just about the return for the company, but it's the return for the individuals that are doing that, because so many people are left unsettled because they don't have the tools. Give them the right tools, empower them, and they become enablers. And can you imagine growing a group of people that are enablers of others? How fantastic could that be, hey? If we were all enabling people instead of bringing them down. So this is designed for real workplace trainers, and I don't want people to get confused with that word trainers. We are saying everyone is a potential workplace trainer because we're all training someone on something. So it's not about theory. It's not come along and learn the theory. It's a really practical, hands-on approach. And they would come to a workshop, they would engage with the trainer, and they would learn how to use these tools, learn the model, but then also it's open to be adjusted for fit for purpose, so those conversations can happen. So here, immediate application, because you walk away with this toolkit that says, here's practical implementation guides. A lot of people spoke when we go back to how we started the webinar with the challenges around documentation, structured process, recording. How do we know it happened? What's happening with all of this? So here because you've got a toolkit and you've got this rich set of templates, that confidence straight away starts. If you look at that first block there, well, we're going to help you structure those training conversations with clarity. So you straight away walking in, I don't have to think about what do I have to tell this person, because I'm going to have a guide that shows me, think on this. Have you considered this? In this step, you've got to now proceed to consider this. And so it will just guide you. So the next one is that guide tasks consistently across teams. It's going to support this effective skills transfer during the real work. It's happening as we go. Reinforcing, Mark spoke about, if we don't reinforce, that bucket just leaks some more and some more and some more. Because remember, it's a paper-based. Whether you do it as a soft copy, all good and well, I don't mind. You know, no one will mind if it's soft copy. But what I'm saying is it's forcing people to record their thoughts and plan and track and trace. So that reinforcement, I as the learner, the person being trained, can go back and have a look at those. I can ask for a copy. I can say, okay, these were the steps in that process. I've got a documented guide now. This is not there to replace an SOP. Understand that. This is to add to that SOP to say, well, I've got the SOP, but in practical terms, I need to see it being done and I need to know, do this, do this, do this. Sign off of workplace competence. Now, this toolkit that we've designed can really be instrumental in guiding workplace conversations. If you think that performance conversations, we'll often have in training, well, you know, we train people away from using words like you always, it seems like, quantify. So with this, it's about, well, you had the training. What part of this process do you still need assistance with? I see you were declared competent then. Maybe it's possibly because you haven't practiced the skill ongoing that you're having a problem. Let's revisit. But you've got the tracking, you've got the documentation. So it can help these feedback, employee conversations, up the line, supervisors or managers checking in. The development, you heard Janine say earlier, it will help you peg down that this person's coping here, but they're not coping here. So this is an area for other training or development. What has to happen in this space? And then there was something else that I wanted to add. Oh, succession planning. Often we put courses together for transferring knowledge in the workplace. You know, Janine spoke about a cross-functional. Now, we were sitting with a client recently, and it was so inspiring to hear how people can jump from one area on a production floor to another area because maybe on a Monday, there's higher absenteeism, or on a Friday, higher absenteeism, and they phone around and they say, okay, but we need to reach our quotas and all that, we need people also on this section. So send me one of yours, send me one of yours, send me one of yours. Now, if you're looking at training people to be cross-functional, this is a perfect tool to do that, because again, it's a structured process that brings consistency to the way in which people are trained.
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, just listening to the two of you, both Janine and yourself, just before I get into the next steps, the word that comes up quite regularly there is confidence. And I think back to my days many, many moons ago being a sports coach. And one of the key things you want to do is build confidence in your players. And I think you can put that straight back into the workplace environment. We want to build confidence. And I remember we kind of followed 3 key areas. One of them was preparation. So in other words, practice, doing it, having a structured format to do your practice or your preparation. That gives you confidence. Number 2 was clarity. If I'm clear on what I'm going to be doing, then I know exactly what I need to execute on. So that component of clarity, I heard you mention that as well, Lisa. And finally, repeated success brings confidence. So once you've done it once and you get success out of it, you can do it again and again and again. But it takes time to get to that place where you can build that confidence. So next step, how are we going to build those enablers? Lisa called them enablers. I call them opportunity for multipliers in your business. Because if you can enable more people and they can do it confidently, you multiply the results across your business. So on the 23rd of July, which is next month, we're going to be running a public program, and that specifically looks at how do you put on-the-job training into practice. A lot of what was shared today will be covered in greater depth. So I implore you, if you don't want to lose the investment on your training and you want to plug those holes, look at a structured, formal on-the-job process. Anybody that touches those areas, whether trainers, managers, coaches, supervisors, team leaders, or any other experienced employee that can contribute to on-the-job training, get them involved, get them onto that public program. You'll see there's a barcode there, a QR code, and you can scan that. It'll give you more details. We will share, obviously, the PowerPoint with you post this session, and you will have it there to go and have a look, see what's covered, but get people involved, get them enrolled. I think it's a perfect opportunity to use on-the-job training to maximize your training spend and obviously create what we call these multipliers in your business. Now, if public programs are not the way you want to go and you prefer something more specific to your environment or your team, then please speak to us. We've got our contact number there. Our email address is also there on the right-hand side, or just liaise directly with the business relationship manager that you're in touch with. And let's open up the conversation. We can come into your environment. We can help you. We can look at how on-the-job training can be applied in your environment. And then we can hopefully come up with a solution that helps you create these confident multipliers in your organization. So with that, there is also another QR code. When you get this presentation, please take some time to give us feedback. It helps us know where your challenges are. It helps us also improve and hopefully close some of our skills gaps when we do these webinars. But with that, I want to say thank you so much to Lisa, Janine, Stephanie. Lisa, you've been championing this program for a while now, and it's wonderful to see it actually come to fruition. And already we can see, judging just by the feedback that we're getting from clients, that this is going to make a massive impact in results. Janine, thank you for bringing your insights in the wonderful way that you have the ability to articulate things on screen. You just draw your audience in, and we love listening to you. And of course, Stephanie, our marketing genius, she puts together these wonderful PowerPoints and slides and polls, and it always looks on point. So thank you very much. Okay, so with that, I want to say thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I hope that there's a lot of value that you can take away from the session. In fact, I know that there is. Now it's just about the application. I mean, that's always where it happens, hey, where the rubber hits the tar. Right, enjoy your Wednesday. I think we managed to give you 5 minutes of your day back, plus the presentation will follow. And if you've got any questions, please be in touch with us. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you for joining us. Yes. Thank you, Janine. Thank you, Stephanie. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.